A man who was bored with living in London and desired to move to the country was looking for a house from which he could get to his office in the city easily every day. One day he saw an advertisement for a suitable house in Hampshire, which was claimed to be within a stone throw of a railway station from which there were frequent trains to London. He telephoned the house agency and arranged to go down by train the next day and have a look at the house. The house agent met him at the station and they drove to the house, which was at least a kilometer from the station. The man who had come to see the house turned to the house agent when they reached it and objected. I should be very interested to man who threw that stone you mentioned in your advertisement. Mr. Robinson won a lot of money on football pools, but he did not know what the best thing to do with it would be. So he went to a friend who knew a lot about money matters. This friend said to him, "Go and buy some modern paintings. Their value goes up every year." Mr. Robinson went to a good art shop and looked at some modern paintings. He did not understand them at all and thought that they were terrible and also very expensive. At last he saw a small picture which did not have a price on it. It was square and white and had a black spot in the middle and a narrow brass frame. Mr. Robinson liked it better than any of the others in the shop. "How much is this one?" he said to the shopkeeper. "That, sir," answered the shopkeeper, "is the electric light switch. Army camps always have to be guarded, of course, to make sure that nobody goes in or out without permission. Otherwise, soldiers could go out when they were not supposed to, and anybody could come in at any time and cause all sort of trouble. There's usually a guard composed of several soldiers at each gate, and the men in the guard take turns to stand at the gate with a gun and stop everyone who wants to go in or out to see their passes. The man on the guard is told to say, 'Halt, who goes there?' if anyone comes towards the gate. A soldier was guarding the gate of a camp at night when he heard a sound in the dark. 'Halt, who goes there?' He shouted nervously. 'Nobody,' a voice answered. The soldiers thought for a few seconds and then said, 'Well, is there anyone with you?' Harry Marsh was a driving examiner who had to test people who wanted to get a driving license. One day he came out of his office as usual and saw a car beside the driver and told him to check the lights, then the brakes, and then all the other usual things. The driver performed everything promptly and flawlessly without saying a word. Then Harry told the driver to start his engine and drive forward. Then he told him to turn right into a side road, stop, go backwards into another side road, and then drive to the office again. On the way, the driver said to Harry politely, "Could you please tell me why we are doing all things? I was passing through this town and only stopped to look at my map." A famous writer who was visiting Japan was invited to give a lecture at a university to a large group of students. As most of them could not understand spoken English, he had to have an interpreter. During his lecture, he told an amusing story which went on for a rather long time. At last, he stopped to allow the interpreter to translate it into Japanese and was very surprised when the man did this in a few seconds. After which all the students laughed loudly After the lecture, the writer thanked the interpreter for his good work and then said to him, "Now please tell me how you translated that long story of mine into such a short Japanese one." "I didn't tell this story at all," the interpreter answered with a smile. "I just said the honorable lecturer has just told a funny story. You will all laugh, please." Joe and Helen Mills had two small children. One of them was 6 and the other was 4. They always resist going to bed, and Helen was always complaining to Joe about this. But as he did not come home from work until after they had gone to bed during the week, he was unable to help except at weekends. Joe considered himself a good singer, but really his voice was not at all musical. However, he decided that if he sang to the children when they went to bed, it would help them to relax and gradually they would go to sleep. He did this every Saturday and Sunday night until he heard his small son whisper to his younger sister, "If you pretend that you're asleep," he stops. When Mr. Andrews left university, he got a good job in a big oil company. But after he had been there for a few years, he decided that he would like a change. He also wanted to get a more important position so that he could get more money and perhaps also do more interesting work. So he put an advertisement in several newspapers saying what experience he had had, describing the kind of job he had at that time and the kind he would like to have. One of the answers he received was from another man who was looking for a job too. This man wrote to him, "Dear sir, when you get a new job, please be kind enough to give my name and address to your present employer, as I have been trying to find a position like yours for a long time." Sir Williams was a gardener, and a very good one too. Last year he came to work for Mrs. Elphinstone, who was old, fat, and rich. She knew nothing about gardens, but thought that she knew a lot, and was always interfering. One day, Mr. Williams got angry with Mrs. Elphinstone and called her an elephant. She did not like that at all, so she went to a lawyer, and a few months later, Mr. Williams was in court accused of calling Mrs. Elphinstone an elephant. The magistrate found Mr. Williams guilty, so Mr. Williams said to him, "Does that mean that I'm not allowed to call this lady an elephant anymore?" "That's quite correct," the magistrate answered. "And am I allowed to call an elephant a lady?" the gardener asked. "Yes, certainly," the magistrate answered. Mr. Williams looked at Mrs. Elphinstone and said, "Goodbye, lady." A lot of people go to Seaside for their holidays, and the various towns try to organize entertainment for them. In one seaside holiday town in the south of England, agreements were made for a band to play outdoors in a public park every evening for a week. Unfortunately, it rained the first evening, and although the band performed well, there was only one person in the audience because although the band was undercover, the audience were not. The man was sitting in a chair wearing waterproof hats and coats. After an hour, the conductor of the band went to this man and inquired whether he had a special request. "Yes, I have," said the man. "Please finish as soon as you can. I'm the keeper of this park, and I want to lock the gates and go home." The cautious captain of a small ship had to go along a coast with which was unfamiliar, so he tried to find a qualified pilot to guide him. He went ashore in one of the small ports where his ship stopped, and a local fisherman pretended that he was one because he needed some money. The captain took him on board and let him tell him where to steer the ship. After half an hour, the captain began to suspect that the fisherman did not really know what he was doing or where he was going, so he said to him, "Are you sure you are a qualified pilot?" "Oh, yes," answered the fisherman. "I know every rock on this part of the coast." Suddenly, there was a terrible tearing sound from under the ship. At once the fisherman added, "And that's one of them." Mr. Hodge was the owner and editor of a small newspaper. He always tried to bring his readers the latest news. One day he received an excited telephone call from someone who claimed that he had just come through a big flood in a village up in the mountains. He described the flood in great detail, and Mr. Hodge wrote it all down and printed it in his paper that evening. He was delighted to see that no other paper had got hold of the story. Unfortunately, however, angry telephone calls soon showed that he had been tricked. So in the next day's paper he wrote, "We were the Green Bridge had been destroyed by a flood. Today we are proud to say that we are again the first newspaper to bring our readers the news that yesterday's story was quite false." While Mr. Green was waiting for a bus, one morning a car passed him, going very rapidly. Mr. Green just had time to think, "That fellow's certain to have an accident if," before that was exactly what happened. The car hit the side of the bus violently as it was passing, and there was a terrible noise and quite a lot of damage. Mr. Green hurried to see whether anyone had been hurt, but anyone was all right. However, the bus driver asked him to be a witness at the trial, and Mr. Green agreed. At the trial, the judge asked Mr. Green, "How far were you from the place where the accident took place?" 11 meters and 48 centimeters, Mr. Green answered. The judge was astonished and said, "How do you know the distance so exactly?" "Because I was expecting some fool to ask me," Mr. Green answered.